The tower stood alone on the edge of a craggy cliff with waves of the Atlantic Ocean, marking one of the remote corners of Cape Albright, a towering ancient lighthouse. Built in late 1800s, it had once been manned by an enigmatic man named Ewan Callahan. He was one who kept to himself and rarely spoke to others outside. One stormy night, Ewan vanished into thin air. All that stood atop the tower was a guttering lantern. After that, to anyone who by chance entered that lighthouse, a series of strange things were to happen. She was a young historian who became crazily passionate about haunted places and ghost stories. She came across this particular lighthouse having a weird history. Jessica developed an obsession for that particular lighthouse. She had aimed to untangle all the mysteries that had created around that place, which was despite all warnings coming from the localities where they say it's haunted and nobody is supposed to sleep there overnight. Still, Jessica's curiosity was unable to let her go. It was night, and Jessica climbed up to the top of the lighthouse. She looked down and saw that it was an extremely old and dusty lantern, untouched since the day Callahan disappeared. Then she heard footsteps echoing down the narrow spiral staircase beneath her, even though she was alone. She shrugged it off as the wind or her imagination, so she continued exploring. A chill ran down her spine. Later, rummaging down the lower floors, she chanced on an old battered diary hidden under a loose floorboard. It belonged to Callahan, who had filled its pages with frenzied notes in his final days. He wrote of the mysterious presence he felt every night, a shadow at the edge of his vision whispering his name. Callahan had written about feeling trapped, bound to the lighthouse, and he had scrawled one final, desperate sentence: "The storm is coming. There is no escape." As Jessica read further, a creeping sensation began to make her think that something was watching her. The air around her started growing cold, and shadows began twisting and moving in unnatural ways. Sheaving with determination, she went down to the basement. There, she found a secret room that had all sorts of strange symbols covering the walls and the air thick with dark cryptic drawings. And right at the center of the room lay a heap of old bones wrapped around an antique rusty lantern that just flickered ominously at her the moment she stepped into that room. She was only just beginning to realize that the bones were Callahan's and how this accursed place must have trapped some part of him inside her, and the spirit had now stuck her in here. At once she shuddered as she saw her shadow thrown in a manly shape from the lantern's rays. She now went to the door to go out, but that door shut on her tight, putting her in her prison house. She hammered on it furiously. There was no getting it open. Then she heard the chilling, whispering voice in her ear, "Stay with me. Forever." A terror struck Jessica's soul as she knew she was destined to become part of that curse, like Callahan, to be bound inside the lighthouse. Panicked and determined to rip herself loose, she scratched at the door wildly, as the blur of vision and world was melting into darkness. So that when, the next morning, the locals come back, they find only an empty lighthouse, no Jessica. There remains only an old lantern, and it softly flickers in darkness as if also harboring a secret.